Welcome everyone. Today we will discuss what would have happened if the Austrian Empire were formed. Now, as a bit of historical context, the Austrian Empire had existed ever since the 1400s, with the Habsburg dynasty in charge of Austria and the estates of Bohemia, Hungary, and Croatia. This dynasty had several highs and lows, but following the defeat of Napoleon, the Austrian Empire was at its territorial and diplomatic peak. Their empire stretched from the Carpathian Mountains in the east to the city of Milan in the west. The Kaiser of Austria was also previously the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, that title was replaced with President of the German Confederation. The Austrian Empire was the second largest empire in Europe and was extremely rich and powerful, but they had their fair share of enemies and internal problems. In the German Confederation, Austria's main rival was the Kingdom of Prussia, who was militarily and economically way ahead of Austria. Prussia had also taken steps to undermine Austria's influence over the German Confederation, such as the Zollverein, which was a customs union of the German states created by Prussia that importantly did not include Austria. Down south, Austria's longtime rival of the Ottoman Empire was on the decline. There had been tension between the two, but ever since the Austro-Turkish War of 1788 to 1791, the two hadn't fought a war, and Austria even diplomatically supported the Ottomans to counter Russian dominance in the region. In Italy, Austria's main rival was the Kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont, who dreamed of uniting the Italian peninsula into one united Kingdom of Italy. This directly coincided with Austria's goal in the region, who held influence in all the other Italian states while directly controlling Venetia and Lombardy. France and Russia also did not like the Habsburgs and weren't opposed to seeing them collapse. Internally, the Austrian Empire had several problems. The biggest problem was the sheer amount of ethnicities in the empire. Austrian Germans only made up about 23% of the population, while the Hungarians or Magyars made up 21% of the population. The rest of the empire was made up of Croats, Slovaks, Czechs, Poles, Ruthenians, Italians, and Romanians. The Austrians did try to Germanize some of these ethnicities at various points throughout history, but it never really worked. All the while, the Magyars had special privileges in the empire. The Hungarian crown was extremely strong and had a lot of power. All of these problems came to head in 1848 when the very existence of the Austrian Empire was threatened. It all started with protests in Vienna to remove Clemens von Metternich. Soon, revolts and protests broke out in all portions of the empire. The Hungarians declared their independence from the rest of the empire, while Sardinia-Piedmont declared war to liberate Lombardy-Veneto. The empire would have fallen right then and there had it not been for the 200,000 Russians that had come to its aid. Russia agreed to help Austria with the promise that Austria would aid Russia in an upcoming war. So Austria managed to survive. Hungary was placed under martial law, with Emperor Franz Joseph revoking many of the previous privileges Hungary enjoyed. In 1853, the Crimean War started, with Russia being at war with Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire. Both sides pressured Austria to join their side, but they remained neutral. After this, Russia made it clear that they would never help Austria again. Austria continued as normal, but stability in the Italian provinces was slowly being reduced as Sardinia-Piedmont funded separatists against Austria. In 1859, this all came to head in the Second Italian War of Independence. In this war, France and Sardinia-Piedmont defeated Austria, and Sardinia-Piedmont gained Lombardy. Soon they united most of central Italy, and after the expedition of the 1000, most of Italy was united. While in Austria, things got worse. In 1864, Austria and Prussia put aside their differences and invaded Denmark, splitting up Schleswig-Holstein between themselves. In 1866, the Brothers' War started, with Austria and Prussia going to war over the fate of the German states. At the same time, Italy declared war on Austria too. Prussia mopped the floor with Austria, establishing the North German Confederation, while Austria lost Venetia to Italy. During this time, the Hungarians demanded that their privileges be restored and were willing to start another war for it. So what we got was the Ausgleich, or Great Compromise. This made Austria and Hungary basically equals. Hungary was given its own parliament and was effectively its own state. This gave birth to Austria-Hungary, and the rest is history. But what if Austria actually reformed instead of what we got in our own timeline? Today we will discuss that, but before starting the scenario, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel as it would help me create more alternate history scenarios just like this. Also, this video is a collaboration video with Just a Greek Historian. He will upload a video on what if Austria collapsed. After this video, you can head to his channel to watch his video. But without any further ado, let's start the scenario. Now, while dealing with Hungary, we would need to make sure that the deal we give them won't be as good as the deal they got in our own timeline. We would need to appease the Magyars while not giving them de facto independence. We would need to make sure that Hungary, in the aftermath, will not be the legal equal of Austria. For that, we would need another great power to mediate things. Russia would be unwilling to do this and would even be rooting for the situation to go south and for things to get violent. Prussia or the North German Confederation simply won't care, while France wouldn't see the benefit in aiding Austria. That would leave Britain, who would be willing to mediate things to conserve the balance of power. The deal that would be finalized would see Hungary get its own crown, Transylvania and Vojvodina are returned to them, while Croatia is kept under Austrian control. Hungary would be allowed to elect its own leaders, but it would not have its own parliament. Instead, Hungarian politicians and noblemen would be granted special positions in the Austrian House of Lords and House of Deputies. This would allow Hungary to pretty much have large amounts of autonomy in the empire. They would get to have their own army, but would be united with the rest of the empire on the basis of economy, foreign policy, governance, and having the same monarch, who would still retain ultimate authority over the entire empire. As we approach the 1870s, this new status quo would become the norm, as both Hungary and the rest of the empire would slowly prosper and would economically grow. In our timeline, Hungary started a policy of Magyarization with the goal of making the minorities of the empire more Hungarian. Here, no such policy would be enacted, as the emperor would feel that this would further destabilize the empire, so Hungary would continue as normal, with the Liberal Party usually being in charge. All in Austria, each of the minorities would be played off each other, but in the elections of 1876, the German nationalists would come to power. Around the same time, in 1878, Russia and the Ottomans would once again go to war, with this war being a complete and utter embarrassment for the Turks. Among this confusion, Austria would invade Bosnia, and the territory would be jointly controlled by both Austria and Hungary, till in 1879, the ruling party comes up with a way to properly annex Bosnia, while also securing German dominance in the Austrian portion of the empire. A third crown would be created, called Illyria. It would have its own army and leaders, but would have to share everything else with the rest of the empire. It would also have its own seats in the Austrian parliament. To accommodate all this, the Austrian Empire would officially change its name and flag to the United Kingdom of Danubia, or the Danubean Empire. The inclusion of this third crown, however, would have a catch. Initially, the government and representatives of Illyria would be mostly Catholic Croats, with more and more people slowly getting equal rights. In Hungary, this would allow the Magyars to have a majority at 55%, allowing them to pass whatever laws they desire, although this would be after the approval of the parliament in Vienna and the Kaiser. While in Austria, the Germans would have a majority at 47%. Many people would also be considering creating a fourth crown in Galicia, but for now it wouldn't happen due to fears of backlash from Russia and Germany. All the while, the internal reforms done would allow Danubia to have a more efficient and competent military compared to our own timeline, while the economy booms. In terms of foreign policy, Danubia would receive large sums of investment from both Britain and Germany. Germany under Wilhelm II would see Danubia as less of an ally and more of a lackey, which would antagonize Danubia, while Britain would treat Danubia more as an ally and an equal, leading to the two getting closer. This would worsen Anglo-Russian relations, as Russia would have a deep hatred for Danubia after their annexation of Bosnia and refusal to help Russia in the Crimean War. This would also result in Britain and Russia to slowly become enemies, leading to Russia getting closer to Germany. In 1885, war breaks out between Serbia and Bulgaria, with Danubia here supporting Bulgaria while Russia supports Serbia, leading to the conflict being drawn out till February 1886. As the 1900s start, things gradually get more and more heated. Following the end of the Second Balkan War, the Balkans would once again be arranged. In the Congress of Berlin, Bismarck once said, "Europe is like a powder keg, ready to explode, and it will, I do not know when and where it will happen, but it will probably be caused by some damn foolish thing in the Balkans. This would be true, as Bulgaria once again declares war on Serbia in an attempt to gain Macedonia. This would escalate with Danubia, more specifically Illyria, declaring war on Serbia. Russia, after Germany's approval, joins in against Danubia. Germany also joins the war and executes the Schlieffen Plan, with the German army soon reaching Paris. France moves its capital to Bordeaux, and Britain joins the fight to hold off the Germans. In the east, Russia, being as incompetent as ever, performs poorly against Danubia, with the Danubians using all three of their armies. The Hungarian army would hold back the Russians, leading to things cooling down in Galicia. In the Balkans, Illyria and Bulgaria would soon manage to overrun Serbia and Montenegro, then invading Albania to chase the fleeing Serbian army. In Austria itself, the army stationed there would hold off the Germans, who would face a lot of trouble in crossing the mountainous terrain of the Sudetenland and Western Austria. In 1915, new players would enter the war, with the Ottomans joining the Entente and declare war on their eternal rivals in St. Petersburg. Italy would declare war on Danubia and the Entente, but that would backfire horribly, as the British Navy blockades the Italian coast while the Illyrian army moves in to face the demoralized Italians. Greece would also join the war against Bulgaria and the Ottomans, but would soon get blockaded by Britain and would get stuck in Macedonia. Lastly, Japan joins the conflict and declares war on Russia and Germany. Quickly, they take the German possessions in the Pacific and attack Russia, taking Vladivostok and forcing Russia to send more forces to the east to stabilize things. As 1916 approaches, Franz Joseph meets his end. He is succeeded by Franz Ferdinand, who rallies Danubia forward. In the Caucasus, the combined Ottoman-British armies manage a breakthrough and capture Yerevan, making their way to Baku and capturing the city. In Asia, the British open up another front after convincing Afghanistan and agreeing to grant them their claimed lands. British soldiers with Afghan and local Turkic help moved into Central Asia, quickly reaching the Oxus. Elsewhere in Europe, the Franco-British armies managed to win the crucial Battle of Orleans, making things more equal on the Western Front. Things now look more equal, and only time will tell who breaks first. And that would be Italy. With the British blockading them and the war going bad for them ever since the start, the Italians would be extremely demoralized and hungry. By early 1917, the Danubian Illyrian army managed to capture Venice, resulting in Italy's surrender. Now that the Italians were dealt with, Danubia moves its Illyrian army north to aid the Hungarian army. The timing would also be perfect, as Russia launches the Brusilov offensive. Here, due to a more competent and larger army, Danubia manages to largely hold out. Down south, the Bulgarians would manage to reach Thessaloniki, as Greece, who was also suffering from the blockade, would surrender. This would leave Russia and Germany, who would have their fortunes reversed. In Galicia, Danubia starts an offensive into Poland, capturing Warsaw and soon marching into Ukraine. By mid-1917, things would turn from bad to worse for Russia, as the Tsar is removed and a provisional government is set up. This would lead to Finland breaking off, as they were only tied with Russia due to their shared monarch. The provisional government would have an even harder time managing everything, as the fronts turned from bad to worse. By early 1918, Danubia reaches Kiev, while Japan advances further in Siberia. The Ottomans and British would also advance in the Caucasus and Central Asia. Seeing the situation as hopeless, the Russians surrender by mid-1918. This would leave the Germans, who would now have to face Danubia, who would gradually push them out and would start an offensive in Silesia. By this time, Paris is liberated, and the Germans, seeing how hopeless the situation was, decide to surrender, ending the Great War on the 11th hour of the 11th day on the 11th month. The peace deal would be as follows. Italy wouldn't lose any core lands, but their colonies would be a different story. Somalia would be lost to Britain, Eritrea to neutral Abyssinia, while Libya would be returned to the Ottomans. Greece would lose western Thrace and large parts of Macedonia to Bulgaria, while the Ottomans get Rhodes and some Aegean islands. Serbia and Montenegro would get partitioned between Bulgaria, Albania, and Danubia, with them becoming a part of Illyria. Russia would lose Vladivostok to Japan and the Caucasus to the Ottomans, while they would be forced to give independence to Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine. Germany would see the same peace deal mostly, but they wouldn't lose Western Prussia. Instead, Danubia, more specifically Austria, would annex Silesia. All the defeated powers would have to pay war reparations and would have army restrictions. Immediately after the war, the question of Galicia would be brought up again. In the end, it would be decided that Austria would split the territory between Poland and Ukraine, but the two would become monarchies, with the Habsburg ruling both nations, making them allied to Danubia. Due to no US involvement here, the Roaring Twenties and the following Great Depression wouldn't be as severe as they were in our own timeline. During this time, Danubia would prosper, but soon things would turn bad. In Italy, the fascists under Benito Mussolini would come to power, while in Germany, the funny mustache man comes to power, both of whom would desire the destruction of Danubia. In Russia, they would start preparing for a grand reconquest of their lost territories. The future looks uncertain for both Danubia and the world, and only time will tell if it all explodes into another great war. But that was it for this video. Now that you're done with my video, head on over to Just a Greek Historian's video to watch What If the Opposite Happened and Austria Collapsed. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I love reading them. But for now, this was Alternate History Chronicles, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.